Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking a really fascinating and honestly deeply important topic by looking at some vital data from the Scottish Health Action on alcohol problems. We are going to examine the critical but so often overlooked biological links between alcohol consumption and cancer. You know, we constantly hear about the impact of alcohol on the liver or our cardiovascular system, right? But the cellular story of what actually happens when we drink and how that relates to oncology, well, it's a narrative we really need to get our heads around. We've got some incredible data to get through today, so let's jump right in.
Okay, really quickly, here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. The hidden cancer risk, 2. How alcohol damages cells, 3. The data on cancers, 4. The breast cancer link, and finally, 5. Guidelines and interventions.
So, I've got a question for you right off the bat. When you think about the health risks of drinking, what instantly comes to mind? A killer hangover? Maybe cirrhosis of the liver? The common misconception is that alcohol pretty much only damages the liver. And while that is absolutely true, the scientific reality is way broader. The medical community has actually established strong evidence of plausible mechanisms where alcohol directly causes cancers of the oral cavity, the pharynx, the larynx, the esophagus, the colon, the rectum, and the breast. It's a total systemic risk, not just a localized one.
To really put a number on the scale of this issue, check this out. An estimated 6% of all new cancer cases each year are directly attributable to alcohol consumption. I want you to just pause and think about that for a second. We aren't just looking at a dry statistic on a screen here. We're talking about thousands of real people behind this number every single year. 6% of new diagnoses could potentially be prevented just by changing our relationship with alcohol. That makes this one of the most actionable public health insights we've got.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the hidden cancer risk.
Before we look at alcohol in total isolation, we kind of need to understand the wider context of how our daily habits contribute to cancer across the population as a whole. The data tells us that a staggering 1/3 of all cancers are linked to lifestyle risk factors. We're talking things like smoking, diet, physical inactivity, and, of course, alcohol. When we look at the primary case study area from our source material, which is Scotland, we see a pretty concerning trend. Half of the Scottish population is navigating life with 3 or more of these compounding lifestyle risk factors. And when we isolate just alcohol, the numbers stay incredibly high. 46% of men and 38% of women are drinking above current sensible guidelines. That is nearly half the adult male population putting themselves at a statistically higher risk.
Moving right along, Section 2, how alcohol damages cells. Let's zoom way in from the population level all the way down to a microscopic level and trace exactly what happens when you take a sip of a drink. So what's the actual biological sequence of events? Step 1, ethanol, which is the alcohol in your drink, gets consumed. Step 2, your body has to process it, and, well, this is where the trouble starts. Your metabolism breaks that ethanol down into a byproduct called acetaldehyde. On top of that, this metabolic pathway generates highly reactive oxygen-containing molecules. Then we hit Step 3. Both the acetaldehyde and these reactive oxygen molecules cause direct damage to your DNA. When DNA is damaged and your cells try to repair it, mutations can occur. And those mutations are exactly what kickstart tumor development over time.
So, the absolutely crucial point here is understanding acetaldehyde. This isn't just some harmless byproduct, it is the specific culprit. In a ton of animal experiments, acetaldehyde itself has been proven to be a cancer-causing substance. It literally reacts with your cellular DNA to form cancer-promoting compounds. And when chronic heavy drinkers combine this with other factors like smoking, which brings in its own massive array of carcinogens, the risk doesn't just add up, it multiplies. It compounds the metabolic damage exponentially.
Okay, zooming back out, let's hit Section 3, the data on cancers.
Let's look at the hard epidemiological data to see exactly which cancers are most affected out in the real world. When we look at the totally rising trend of oral cavity and pharynx cancers over the last few decades, what's wild is that a massive, totally preventable fraction is directly driven by alcohol. For both men and women, approximately half of all these cancers are estimated to be entirely attributable to alcohol consumption. Half. I mean, it clearly shows just how much of this specific cancer burden could be wiped out simply by lifestyle changes.
The demographic data also reveals a truly fascinating sociological finding, which researchers often call the deprivation paradox. The stats show that affluence actually correlates with heavier drinking. Men and women in the least socioeconomically deprived areas are the most likely to drink above those recommended sensible limits. Yet, and here's the paradox, when we look at cancer incidence, particularly for the larynx, liver, and esophagus, the highest rates are actually found in the most disadvantaged communities.
Why is that? Because in deprived areas, alcohol consumption is way more frequently compounded by other heavy lifestyle factors, mainly smoking. It's a really stark reminder that our health is basically dictated by the total ecosystem of our habits.
Let's pivot slightly for Section 4, the breast cancer link.
We need to shift our focus to a very specific, highly critical finding in the data regarding women's health. A startling fact that usually catches people completely off guard is that an estimated 700 cases of breast cancer each year in this dataset are attributed solely to drinking alcohol. And crucially, those 700 cases outnumber all the other alcohol-attributable cancers in women combined. For women, breast cancer is hands down the most significant oncology risk associated with alcohol consumption.
Now, you might be wondering, does acetaldehyde cause this too? Actually, scratch that. The mechanism here is quite different. The strongest biological explanation for the link between alcohol and breast cancer isn't just DNA damage from acetaldehyde, it's hormonal. Randomized controlled trials show that consuming alcohol actually increases sex hormone concentrations in the body, specifically estrogen. And elevated estrogen levels are a very well-documented driver for breast cancer development. So drinking, even within the limits of sensible advice, may still carry an increased risk for this specific disease.
Finally, let's wrap things up with Section 5, Guidelines and Interventions.
All right, having thoroughly covered the biological risks and the heavy data, let's focus on the solutions. Because reducing harm isn't just theoretical here, it is totally achievable. The recommended sensible consumption guidelines derived from our health data are pretty straightforward. For men, the limit is no more than 3 to 4 units a day, capping at 21 units a week. For women, it's 2 to 3 units daily, maxing out at 14 units weekly. Crucially, the guidance strongly advises taking at least 2 consecutive days of total abstinence each week, just to allow your body's tissues to rest and recover. And just to be super precise, when we say unit, we are talking about a standard measurement of 8 grams of pure alcohol. Sticking to these guidelines drastically scales back your risk profile.
For anyone looking to make a change, the medical community leans really heavily on something called an alcohol brief intervention, or an ABI. This is a brilliant, evidence-based approach used by health professionals, whether that's your GP or even your dentist. It is not a lecture or a guilt trip. It's an empathetic, tactful conversation designed to just assess your habits without judgment, negotiate realistic reduction goals together, and provide active assistance with behavior modification and follow-up support. Patients overwhelmingly welcome this kind of structured, supportive guidance to help find their own motivation.
I want to share this direct quote from the source material because I feel like it just perfectly captures the spirit of public health. It says, reducing alcohol consumption is often only one of a number of changes that could be made to improve quality of life, but it is one that is achievable. We all know that entirely overhauling your lifestyle, fixing your diet, exercising every day, reducing all your stress can feel incredibly overwhelming. But consciously scaling back on alcohol, that is a highly realistic, totally measurable, and deeply impactful first step that literally anyone can take.
So, I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought. Could rethinking that routine daily glass of wine or beer literally rewrite your long-term health future? Well, the data resoundingly says yes. By understanding the cellular mechanics of acetaldehyde, the hormonal shifts of estrogen, and just a sheer volume of preventable cases, you are now equipped to make truly informed decisions. You have the power to mitigate these hidden risks. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. And hey, here's to making informed, healthier choices moving forward.